So we had a really busy start to the year this year with three conferences the first week of the year, the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference, CES in the consumer electronics space, and ICR in consumer. And Steve, you were at the JP Morgan conference, so it'd be great to hear what you heard at the conference, themes, what investors are thinking about, what are companies thinking about right now that you saw last week.
Yeah, super well-attended conference. What I would say is the tone was guardedly optimistic. If you look at the biotech tape over the last 2 years, from October to now, up 25%, but it's still down 50% from its highs. So most of the issuers are kind of wondering if it's safe right now to come out. They're starting to stretch. IPO documentation's getting refreshed. What we have seen also is a high cadence of M&A activity, and a lot of the meetings were sort of centered on that. A great deal of BD activity. So BridgeBio, which is an account that's very close to Mizuho, just announced $1.2 billion this week. So we're seeing quite a bit of that. But I would say that it's still just sort of cautiously optimistic.
That's great. Andy, what did you see at CES?
So a lot of buzz. Consumer electronics show is always very exciting. You see new TVs, you see new products. Very well attended, 135,000 people this year. That's up from 117 the year before. There were 4,300 exhibitors. That's up from 3,200. So I think the buzz was there, and the theme was CES is back. Obviously, things like electric vehicles and AI and ChatGPT and how that was going to roll out were very prevalent throughout the conference.
Look, I saw the same thing at ICR last week. There were close to 3,000 people there. Private companies well represented, public companies well represented. All the sponsors had teams down there. There was a lot of activity, a lot of dialogue about transactions, and both on the M&A front and on the IPO front. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the next couple of quarters. Steve, when you think about what you heard and what you saw, how do you think that translates into what the new issue calendar might look like in 2024?
Sure. So I think we'll see more IPO activity this year than we did last year, and that's we're coming off a low bar. We're also seeing a ton of pipe activities, and this is a function of, I think, a few different things. One, because of the severity of the decline in the biotech tape, many companies are in baby shelf territory, which means that they have market free floats less than 75 million. So they're somewhat handicapped in terms of how much they can issue. They can circumvent that with pipes, which is basically, a private investment in public equity. So we've seen a high cadence of pipe activity, and I will tell you this, it's being met with the most pedigreed demand I've ever seen in my life. Sovereign wealths and the best investors are really coming to the table with their wallets. And it's being met with issuance that is somewhat Darwinian. Issuers are forced to take a pill and fund their R&D right now. So the final thing I would say is I do think that the calendar is going to be front-loaded this year because of the election. I think it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. Pharmaceutical prices has always been a pinata that both sides can beat. So I think issuers have to be prepared for just sniper-like windows where they can get transactions done.
I couldn't agree more, Steve. Andy, what do you think when you think about the TMT landscape? With the tape changing in the second half of the year, with the Fed pivot, TMT stocks have done very well in the fourth quarter. How does that play out here in the new year? The IPO calendar has been mostly shut the last couple of years, but it seems like meeting cadence has increased. Issuers are thinking about accessing the public markets. What are you seeing on that front?
Yeah, so that's right. The tape was very strong toward the end of the year. The NASDAQ finished up better than 40%. Obviously, that's very laden with TMT names. We were active booker on the ARM IPO, on Klaviyo, came post-September. That was all sort of seen as reopening the IPO market, and then we had some sort of Fed speak that dampened the market and sort of shut everything down. So we've had 2 years of very little issuance, but right now there's 13 TMT deals that are publicly on file or announced that they've confidentially filed. We're working on a number of those, so we see a lot of activity coming up. We want to mandate early January for an IPO that's going to come in sort of June timeframe. So I think there's a lot of stuff happening, and everybody's gearing up. So it should be busy. We did an investor survey at the end of the year, better than 100 investors. Better than 50% still think that TMT is going to outperform this year. And see a heavy calendar, and it's very semi-focused and very software-focused. And I think those play nicely into the themes that we even saw at CES, right? Semis in terms of AI and what's happening there, and software as, the operating system that manages that.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
100%.
Same thing in consumer. I think as you think about what we saw last week and what we're hearing right now is that thematically, there's no particular subsector that's going to dominate in 2024. There's a restaurant deal that will likely come. Right now, there's Amer Sports, which is branded sports equipment and athletic apparel that's on file and we'll be launching in the next couple of weeks. And then beyond that, we're seeing activity not concentrated in any one subsector. So I think the reality is what investors are looking for right now in the consumer space are businesses that are cash flow positive or close to being cash flow positive, but at the same time exhibiting growth opportunities so that they can put capital to work in a in a company that's already proven itself but has the runway. So we continue to see companies think about accessing the markets. I think the other thing that we're starting to see is that sponsors are starting to come back to the market and look at IPO opportunities for their portfolio companies. Over the last couple of months, we've seen a lot of monetizations of existing portfolio companies that are public, but that next step that we've lacked over the last couple of years has been that sponsor-backed IPO pipeline. So I think if you think about all three of the sectors thematically, it feels like we're heading back in the right direction, and hopefully we don't get any market stumbles that trip up that activity moving in the right direction. So look, if you have clients that are looking to go public in any of those three spaces or any spaces, the Mizuho team's ready, willing, here, and able to help you out as you think about that process.